lassie and stand and deliver. Or the devil he may take ya.
Is that what you're just going to do for an hour?
Yes. Hello, Grumsworth.
Oh, hello, Burlokk.
And welcome to all of you, our proud listeners of the Preambull. Your every so often digest of all things hobby is here. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, today we're going to be bringing you a plethora of subjects. We're going to be opening up the dusty old ragged tomes that are our hobby journal. We're going to be talking, very sadly, about system death, engine kill, Burlokk. Sad, sad times, but interesting ones, yeah? And then we're going to follow I think we'll follow a large arachnid. How about that, Burlokk? What do you say to that? Yeah?
Sounds excellent, yes. Interesting times indeed, as Pratchett said.
And bearing that in mind, all those singular moments, this week, what has happened in your world of hobby, Burlokk? What have those moments brought you this week?
Actually, I've been spending a little bit of money.
What?
I know.
Gracious.
If it's not hobby supplies, I'm very rarely spending money. But actually, I picked up a couple of the quite recently released, I think, Forge World squats.
Oh yes.
Yeah, there's the ammo
Ammo
carrier,
Jack.
the ammo jack. That's the guy, and there was the other one they released as well. Two of the Forge World squats, and they're really nice models. I mean, Forge World do a lot of really good stuff. But these ones, they spoke to me, Grumsworth. They did.
Did they?
But only because I'm in a little bit of squat mode actually, and I think it's due to one of our earlier episodes.
Yeah, that'll happen.
I went up into my box-laden attic and had a route through some of my collection, and I thought, I'm going to see where my squats are, because I've got a bunch of old squats sitting around, not doing a lot, and got them out on the table, looked at them all, and they were resplendent in a paint job that I'd given them probably somewhere in the mid-90s. So not my proudest moment paint-wise. So I cleaned a lot of them up. A lot of them saw some of the paint stripper.
Okay.
Some of the plastic parts, I use the ultrasonic cleaner to get them nice and clean. Otherwise, it's usually the trusty Nitramors. Highly toxic.
Of course. Yeah, very, very toxic, the old Nitramors, But that green can, that's been the saving grace of many a bedraggled old miniature bought off eBay, found in your box from the late 90s, that sort of thing. It's useful stuff.
I purchased some of these new squats to go with my old ones, and I actually managed to get a few of the old models for a fairly good price to add to my existing little force that I had accrued. So I've been building some of the old stuff and some of the new Forge World stuff as well. I've worked on one of the old Thud guns, which is really
lovely.
Good. That's sort of a side project that's going to amble along slowly as I get some other bits and pieces done. But I was pleased to have a little bit of a change in direction with some new miniatures. Although I'm working on my Chaos Dwarves, the miniatures are so much bigger than the squats, even though they're both dwarves.
It's the hat though, isn't it? Chaos Dwarves.
It's the hat that gives them all their height. So so I've been in full on 90s dwarf mode for a long while now. But the squats are a nice change of pace. Aside from that, I've been playtesting a friend of mine's roleplay game that he's made. Yes.
And how has that gone?
It's gone really well. It's been good to look at a system in its infancy and play through the first stages of the game, learn some of the mechanics. When you're reading the book through and you're analysing it, you can take in only so much. I think you need to be able to play a game. That's why a lot of games developers these days go to a lot of big conventions, and have playtest tables, and they will playtest for a long time. Which is worth it, I think, given that some of the problems we encountered, this ability might be a little bit overpowered here, that little bit there might need a little bit of a buff. So there are not necessarily balancing things, because I don't think all games need to be precisely balanced like a well-oiled cogitator. But
I agree. Yeah, yeah.
But I do think there needs to be a little bit of control, just so that nothing is the obvious meta choice. So we gladly encountered some of those moments where it was actually, yeah, that needs to be a little bit detuned. That needs to be changed perhaps a bit there. So it was really useful for us as players to be able to contribute to that sort of playtest situation. But also it was really good for our friend there, Ruben. He's a good lad.
Oh, Ruben.
He's been working very, very hard to put this game together. Sort of sci-fi kind of utopian future setting, which is really nice and refreshing to see, which isn't the dystopian norm that a lot of futuristic sci-fi games tend to revolve around. So yeah, that was really nice for him to be able to look at it from a creator's perspective, I think, and see us all playing this game that he'd made from nothing, built up to this game that was actually, for a first proper run, pretty good. Yeah, we were all really pleased. All the players came away from it feeling good about the game, feeling good that we could have contributed to its development.
Yeah, lovely. That's a nice feeling, isn't it? When I've had a similar experience, when you've sat in on other people's projects like that, and you've played through the game, you've rolled some dice, you've maybe moved some proxy models around, this sort of thing. And then at the end, they say, how did you find it? I'm really keen to know what you thought of it. And then when you give them your sort of breakdown, that play testing, it is essential, even if you're creating an unbalanced, sort of wonky but very enjoyable game, it must be nice to have that feedback to go, okay, so this portion enjoyed these bits and these bits and these bits, completely going to write this bit out and I'm going to push this bit up maybe. Or you just go, listen, like, I love this bit about this game. The players all hated it. I'm sticking with it.
That's right. Sometimes you've got to stick to guns. When you've got a vision, sometimes you just got to run with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll be lovely to see how it develops from here, and if we get a chance to play again. And Grumsworth, yourself, you must have been up to something a little, interesting this week.
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I've been up to some interesting stuff, and I've been up to some interesting hobby stuff as well.
Oh,
so it's been a diverse bag, right? Hobby-wise, we're now getting into the last leg. Like, we're so close to completing the entirety of my Necromunda gang, the fabled, now many mentioned Knights of Dogheads, right? So I know next time any of you find people listen to or watch the preamble, you'll find that I've completely scrapped the name. I'll have changed loads of things. Maybe they'll need a repaint at that point.
Oh no.
Who knows, right? This week I've just been putting the finishing touches to the gang leader, Saint Biff. If you're viewing this with your eyeballs there, rather than just listening with your ears, we'll throw up some pictures of him there. So he's kind of about halfway through, I reckon. There's some shading still to go in on him. He's headless, sadly. Yeah, headless Biff. That's what they will be calling him. Once that first bolt round flies his way, I'm sure.
No.
And, then I'll retire the gang. Whatever. Yeah. We'll see. Right. So he still needs his head putting on. He's got some shading to go in. He's a little bit ornate compared to some of the other members of his gang.
As a leader, though, he should be, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've taken a little bit of extra time on him to hit all of his details with the same love and attention. He's got this big sort of necklace type job hanging around with the noose around his throat. It's got some oddments, so I used a few different colours in there. You'll be able to see it in the completed model to bring out that he's kind of his little string of holy relics that he's gathered up, of which the rest of the knights are deeply envious. The great cog on the top of his two-handed hammer there, that's going to have a separate sort of paint treatment compared to anything else in the gang as well. I like the idea that this is one of his most holy relics. So this great cog, he's going to have whitewashed in some sort of foul underhive lime. Better that it might smite the unclean, you see. He's got his little hand flamer there, which are picked out in some different colours as well. Just need to do his base, a fresh head, and we'll see what happens. So this time next week, actually, I will have completed this task. And then I may well suffer you all to listen to me describing who all these guys are and what they're doing following a lunatic like Saint Biff.
Oh, that'd be an absolute treat. I think you should definitely do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. That wouldn't be a sufferance.
We're going to be running a little bit of a Necromunda campaign at some point. So they're all going to be ready and waiting for that to happen. And then I'll be able to move on to my next project, which you folks will be, you will be catching wind of, because I think it's going to be the case. I'm going to encourage some of you fine peoples out there that might have, plucked up enough courage to contact the two people who are speaking to you right now. Maybe one of you brave souls can tell me which of these three choices I'm going to be choosing for my next project.
A mini poll. I like that. Yeah.
A mini poll. That's exactly what it will be called. But that'll be maybe that'll be included in episode 10. Who knows?
The episode 10.
We'll have some news for you folks about episode 10 at the end of this podcast.
Yes.
Won't we, Burlokk?
We will. Keep your eyes peeled.
And your ears shriven.
Keep your ears shriven. Do that very thing.
I think our rambling about hobby journals and shriven ears and peeled eyes has come to the end of its road for now, because we bring to you today a very sad and solemn fact. For this month, on August the 10th there, a very proud and wonderful, very enjoyable, complex, beautiful, thematic, quite original game died. It died its sorry, actual, true death as well. If any of you are in the know about this particular game franchise, we're going to be talking briefly about Guild Ball, which was sadly passed on. And then we're going to have a wider discussion about the death of a game.
Yeah, about engine kill and the collateral damage, I think, that happens as a result of said thing. Because it was some sad news about Guild Ball. I'd known a lot of the miniatures in my time. Seen a lot of them knocking around online. Seen some in your very cabinet there, Grumsworth, as well.
There are some in my very cabinet. That's quite true.
And so, with the familiarity of the miniatures, I did feel like I knew the game a little, not intimately. I never got a chance to play, sadly. But nonetheless, I was disheartened to hear of its passing, of its demise. What was your brief experience of Guild Ball there, Grumsworth?
So I would like to start by saying I think it is really sad that Guild Ball has finally come to the end of its run there. The reason we know this is because quite bravely, I think, the company that produced it, they said as much, didn't they? They said
Steamforged, wasn't it?
Steamforged, that's correct. Yeah. They basically said, we've done as much as we can with this game. There's quite a lot of complexities that lead it to being maybe a project that will be very, very difficult to push onward beyond the point that it's already at. But I can speak to the game being, I played, I don't know, maybe a fistful of games with it, soaked up all its lore, which was really, really good. It had quite an original feel to it, really nicely written, illustrated also. It was a game that had a lot of weight, a lot of work had gone into it. And mechanically as well, the game played like a dream. I think if any of you out there listening have played Guild Ball, you'll kind of understand how technical the game was, how strategic it was for a game that was essentially a very, very small skirmish game. Often 4, 5 or 6 models. You had character cards for all of them, replete with all sorts of interesting actions and reactions they could take. Essentially, you were trying to get a ball up the other end of the field to score goals. The teams often would end up bludgeoning each other to get through their lines to score these goals. But it was a very tight, really well made, really complex, quite easy to learn game. But then to sort of achieve any great skill at it and tournament success, because it was really balanced to play as a competitive tournament game, to do well in that situation, you really had to go hard at it. You really had to learn the play style of your particular team. You had to learn the teams you might be competing against. There was quite a strong, quite sort of iron forged, really locked in meta at the very top tables.
That's interesting to know. Was that? Do you think that was quite a high barrier to entry then?
I do. I think that's almost the situation that caused the company to come to the decision that they weren't going to push it any further, because it wasn't like a barrier to entry. You could play it at a sort of like a sort of a beer and pretzels a night in your mate's kitchen games, that sort of thing. You could do that really well, and it worked really well for that as well. But if you were trying to take your team to a tournament, it was almost like playing a different game. The meta was so dictated so much of what you needed to bring and the style that you needed to play in. And I think the company kind of almost, I'm not going to say writ themselves into a corner, because they could have done a reissue. They could have rebalanced everything.
Right.
But I think they were really proud of what they had achieved with this complex, exciting and interesting game.
Yeah, rightly so.
Very rightly so.
You know, as I say, I haven't had the opportunity to play many games of Guild Ball or any at all.
Yeah.
But one thing I did really enjoy about looking at it was the artwork, and I read some of the background about some of the guilds, etc. And it did seem to have been nurtured. You know, I believe it started as a Kickstarter, didn't it?
I think it did. Yeah.
And it gained some traction within the community, and it done really, really well. And it was the artwork for me that I saw, and I thought, wow, they look really cool. Let me read about
really
this a
good,
little bit. And so that's what brought me in. So that's what I think I'm most sad about, is that it was obviously a lot of work. I think you mentioned it earlier. There's an awful lot of work went into it, and as someone who, you know, has created certain things from time to time, and, you know, helped other people create things, I can understand how much work goes into it. And I think on the release they brought out on the 10th of August, I think some of the developers all chipped in on this particular article to say a thing or two about it and about their experiences, which was nice but sad to read, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was the right call, because I think I think it would have sat ill, I think, with the community at large if they had said, right, the game has got to this stage, we're going to rewrite it all. I don't think that would have gone down well at all. There will still be people playing Guild Ball, you know, at their local clubs and things like this.
Yeah.
The company is just not going to support it anymore. They're not going to be issuing updates, errata, new miniatures, new lore, anything like that. I hope they go on to create something else, because I think what they did was a stellar piece of work.
You know, as a team, they clearly work well with each other, and the talent at their disposal clearly is good enough to make a game of that caliber. Yeah, I do hope to see something more coming from them in the future, for sure.
I think we will do. But this conversation is not specifically about Guild Ball, although that's kind of a good flashpoint for it.
Yeah.
What we're going to have a little ramble about now is when games reach the point of their death, of their end.
And there's quite a few examples actually out there.
Yeah,
there's probably hundreds, thousands of examples out there actually of games that didn't make it beyond Kickstarter stage, or didn't make it at all. But certainly some games that become firm favorites of people's, and can be quite, you know, were quite pioneering in their early days, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Those games that can be considered stalwarts of the community or of the industry, they can come to an end as easily as any other game, I think.
They can.
I mean, some examples of, or an example for me, a game like Rackham Confrontation, created by Rackham. And these guys came along in the sort of the you know, towards before resin casting of miniatures was as popular as it is now. I mean, everything seems to be made in resin these days. So these guys came along when metal miniatures were still being produced en masse, and the quality of their game, their artwork, their studio painters, I believe they were mostly based in France.
That's right. Yeah.
And they became quite popular quite quickly, actually. And they were, when they came, they've been around for a long while, but when they started to gain a little bit of popularity over here in the UK, they were known for a lot of their studio work and how good the quality of their artwork was. I think a lot of the artwork was done by Paul Bonner, who's a fantastic artist, done a lot of stuff.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And so that really helped to capture the immersive world of the confrontation universe. Other games were produced later on. They moved into plastics towards the end of their company's
They
time.
did, didn't they? You're right. Yeah.
They
yeah.
even tried some pre-painted stuff, which they released as kits. So I think they tried a lot of things that they could, to sort of bring themselves back in and keep themselves in the market. But I think so many other companies were riding that wave of quick skirmish-based style play, cheap and good quality resin. That became sort of more the thing, more the flavor. So a company like Rackham there with their game Confrontation, you had the Midnor Dwarves, you had the Alchemists of Durs, you had the Lions of Alahan, beautiful miniatures, really really lovely models. But they sadly came crashing to an end as well, and it was purely we're not.
Why was that? What was the catalyst for their death?
I didn't have my finger on the pulse when it came to that company, dying out. I think really what they've done is they changed their position, and this is only speculation, but I think they changed their position too much. They went from being quite a luxury, elite-looking, quite expensive metal miniatures company with some, with a very talented studio team behind them, and they tried to commercialize a bit too quickly, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
So I think there might have been some business decisions that were made, with all the best intention, but perhaps didn't have the confidence of their customers. I think that could be an issue with what they had, but don't quote me on that. But I think that's how I felt about it, to be sure.
Okay, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that sounds kind of like how some of these things end sometimes. I do seem to remember that it was the case. I remember first seeing some confrontation actual games being played, and I was stunned by how good the miniatures were. Like you say, they were very high end, very luxury looking products, almost like leagues ahead, style wise and quality. The scale was really nicely laid out. It was quite different to everything else that was about at the time. But then slowly, people sort of got on board with this and thought, these guys are doing well with this. This is making sense. I think we need to make something that is in a similar vein, but with cheaper materials, maybe.
Yeah.
And I think they were sort of haggled out of the marketplace. Maybe.
That could be potentially what it was. Yeah, perhaps there was just too much competition.
Yeah,
or offering very similar products.
but they were quite innovative, weren't they? I think they
Pioneering for sure. I think personally, with their miniature design and a lot of their art direction that really captured a small world with a big heart. And I think that there was lots of other companies out there doing, cottoned on, as you say, cottoned onto that idea.
Yeah,
and
I
did
think
their
so.
own thing.
They slipped away. They must have withered away in the night, right? And who did that? Who famously did that, Burlokk? Yes, it was Deirdre.
Deirdre himself, old Grima Wormtongue, who delivered the news.
You know it. So consider us your Grima Wormtongues for this episode. Yeah, so I remember Confrontation really fondly. I'd seen it played. I had seen these miniatures, pictures of their insane paint jobs painted online. Absolutely incredible looking things. And then when it came, I thought, okay, I can get on board with this. They're really expensive, but they look really worth it, and the game system looks superb. And when I wander in, all my coins falling out on my grubby hands, nothing on the shelves. Your independent wargame stores just stopped stocking it anymore.
It did.
Very sad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, have you got any other miniature companies that spring to mind that might maybe met a similar fate?
Yeah, I have one that I will use as a sort of anecdotal beat stick for all sorts of different things.
Okay.
But they go under the name of, or they went under the name rather, of Spartan Games, a UK-based company who created the rules and miniatures, and it was a game called Firestorm Armada. Really, really superb models, in my opinion. Quite kind of basic in their way. They were made of resin. They were in quite a large scale, which I found really compelling and unusual for a space battlefield, a space naval sort of situation. these miniatures were, most of them were the sort of size of a 35 mil tank or something. These were large pieces, which is really nice. The game looked superb because the models had quite a unique look about them, scale, and the design of them. Some of them were a little bit blocky and a bit, I don't know, maybe slightly uninspiring, but they fit really well for a big old battle cruiser or a dreadnought or some other large space-going vehicle. The game system itself was quite easy to get to grips with. It wasn't revolutionary, I wouldn't say, but it was nicely done. It got you playing very quickly. It felt very immersive for a game set in the void there.
Yeah.
A lot was made of ships slowly being stripped down by massive amounts of firepower. The sort of effects of shields buckling under the weight of impacts, point defense systems being stripped away until you get to the armor plating, which slowly was shed as these proud ships continued to kind of duel each other.
Yeah, it's quite compelling, isn't it? Quite compelling indeed.
Very, yeah, it was. And there was a nice amount of fluff, sort of narrative stuff behind it. It wasn't as massive as a game that may have gone on for, that had the storied history, say, of something like Battlefleet Gothic. It was evocative of void combat, and I think they did really well with it. Sadly, and it had a decent sized player base. There were some regular tournaments, although the game was there was very little effort made to balance it, right? Which was a very vocal part of the community were really quite unhappy with this. There was a lot of community-made modifications to the game itself, which people would often run. It was quite interactive. Spartan had a nice kind of, well, actually, I was going to say they had a nice rapport with their player community. No, it's not quite right, actually. It was very love-hate. Yeah. So the community was very engaged, for good or bad. And it made the game a really exciting, kind of ever-evolving. Yeah, so for me, it had everything that I wanted from a tabletop game, in as much as it was quite unique looking. It played really quite smoothly. It was sort of supported right down to the hilt. There was constant adjustments being made, although almost with no aim to balance it, just to continue to make it fresh and fun and enjoyable. Sadly, what it was a game that was under the aegis of Spartan Games. They folded up, I would say, probably about 3, maybe even now 4 years ago, I think, was when they finally said, we're not trading anymore. They actually sold the IP for Firestorm Armada and the ground version set in the same universe. I believe they were sold to Wayland Games. I think the sort of the little seed of all of that work still exists in some form. Whether we'll see anything germinate from it, grow of it,
remains to be seen, doesn't it? Yeah. I mean, there's a swathe of games that we could go and give examples of. Rackham, as we say, Firestorm Armada there, Warhammer, and a lot of the specialist games that went along with that. Warhammer Quest, that obviously that did get remade in a different form.
It did.
Which we'll probably talk about. Gorka Morka, Battlefleet Gothic, you mentioned that already. So there's a swathe of specialist games that had a big following and do still have a big following, actually. And I think as individual gamers and how it affects us, not only is it very sad when a game that you have invested a lot of money and time into, because of course with miniature-based war games, you have to spend a lot of time painting, building the miniatures, etc., and thinking,
which we love.
Yeah, and for me and you, thinking about these projects takes up time. We've done many podcasts now talking about how we plan out our ideas and thoughts.
Oh yeah, we like to do a bit of planning, a lot of it actually, and a lot of thinking as well.
Too much thinking sometimes, but
that's right.
When these games then come to an end and they are pulled from the shelves, there's almost a little bit of betrayal that you feel, isn't there? at how could you do this to me? All the money I've spent, all the time I've invested in this. How could you? That's very often the immediate emotional response I think we get as people to most things. But as gamers, when we've got when we have our hobbies pulled out from under our feet, especially if they happen very quickly, and almost come out of nowhere seemingly, it can be very difficult to handle, can't it?
It can. I think it's something that you have to experience it a little bit to know quite how it feels. I think there are an awful lot of people I mean, this is old news now, so we're not going to dig into the grubby, seedy underbelly of it all. But when Warhammer Fantasy Battles finally met its last death, the community flare up was incredible, wasn't it?
It was enormous. Yeah,
because this was a game that many of us had put together very large armies for, and had played through edition after edition. Slight rule changes were made, the way we played the game changed, which was fine, because you always expect games after a while, especially from G-dubs there, to be updated and evolved and changed. That's their model. That's how they work that. What you do not expect is a game almost out of the blue to just be concluded with a piece of story and a few games played on a table in some remote games workshop. And it's like, now all of that has gone before, we're no longer going to support that. We're not going to carry that on. And you probably need to buy into our new version of the game.
Yeah.
Now, like I say, we're not going to go into that too much, because that's now old news, and you can find the death of Warhammer Fantasy Battles on any website about wargaming under the sun.
And find as many different opinions as you'd like as well. There'll be plenty of them out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, certainly. Yeah. But it is a good example for a really hardcore death of a very, very large, storied game that people will have invested an unfathomable amount of time and money and effort into, that just suddenly was not going to be supported anymore. And as you say, the rug is pulled out from under you. I mean, obviously, we have lived through that sorry time, and played plenty of games of Fantasy Battle before that happened.
Yeah, and in fact, since then as well, to be fair.
So this was just what I was going to say. But so just because a company stops supporting a game, it's not bringing out new miniatures, it's not updating the rules. You can no longer get hold of the paper editions of the rule books and such like this. These games still have a life, don't they, Burlokk?
They truly do.
Yeah.
There is a very large, for a lot of these games, there is a very large, burgeoning, very invested community that travels along this game's lifespan. So it's not just a physical company that creates a bunch of books and creates a bunch of miniatures and puts them out on the shelves of the shops. That happens for sure. But there's also the people that play those games, all right? And they don't go anywhere, do they? They can sometimes continue to carry the torch for certain games well after they've gone, well after they've disappeared into nothing. An example I can give you of that is with Warhammer. Actually, going back to that, there was a 6th edition, which is often hailed as the best edition of Warhammer to have been written. Certainly the most
prime cut.
A prime cut, probably its best version out there. There was a very well organized tournament scene for the 6th edition Warhammer, and there are multiple Facebook groups and Instagram pages and you name it about there dedicated to the 6th edition Warhammer. So it's not just the game Warhammer itself that has gone, but there's obviously every edition that Warhammer had, from 1st edition right the way up to 8th edition. And even at the end of 8th edition, once the game had been declared deceased, there was a very large, very vocal, very well-equipped community force that developed the 9th Age, which massively community-driven, just as this little 6th edition tournament group was as well, which I very happily, very eagerly went along to, played some games. And this is, many, many years after Warhammer had died. So there's a community that comes along with this game, grows along with this game, develops along with it. but will still continue to play that game after it's been
officially pronounced dead.
Officially pronounced dead, exactly, yeah. And I think, there are certain companies that can't come back from those kind of situations because there's often a backlash. There's often a certain amount of distrust that lingers
definitely.
after a situation like that. Certain companies, GW as an example, Games Workshop there, I think they've weathered the storm well enough. There are rumors of Warhammer perhaps seeing a return in its old square bases. So, I think what I'm trying to get at here is, with enough community force behind certain ideas, behind certain play styles or editions, and with enough passion behind some of these older games, perhaps some of these larger companies can indeed see a turnaround of opinion or a change of heart as the IP of Firestorm Armada there was sold on. Perhaps we'll see a resurgence for that as well.
I'd love it if we did.
So yeah, but I mean, it's not just physical war games that can meet their grisly end.
It's not. Sadly, I think actually the death of the digital game is probably a lot more sound and complete, isn't it?
A lot more final, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's many of us that indulge. I'm sure you'll come along with me on this, Burlokk, and many of you viewers and listeners will as well. Many of us that indulge in our war games and our board games and stuff out on a table will like to have a little dabble around with some digital versions.
We will.
We'll like to while away some of those times where it's difficult to get your brushes out and to find an opponent to play, and even to stomach rolling some dice after a week of rolling anything 3 or under. It's just like, okay, right. So now I'm just going to turn the PC on or crank up my console. It's all there. The death of a digital game can often be absolute. If a company stops supporting it and you have no physical version of the game, you don't own any discs for it. If a company decides to shut down the online servers that it runs on, you might be able to find people who are running their own private servers, but often these will be pale shadows. So I would really like to bring up a particular favourite of mine, a game that I played an awful lot of. I didn't play it till its very sad end, but I remember leaving it as it was becoming less populated, which is the sure sign of the sinking ship there. And the sinking ship in question was a game called Wildstar, which was a fine-looking MMO. Yeah, it did well for a few years. It switched to a free-to-play rather than a subscription model, as was the style at the time. So it moved on with it. It continued to receive balancing, support, expansions, this sort of thing. Mechanically very interesting.
Yeah.
The aesthetic for it was quite unique. All round, I would say it was a really kind of winning project. It was in a market that was saturated with things similar to it, but at its very birth, it did everything kind of better than most of its competitors. As time went on, that began to change. And so Wildstar actually suffered complete and fatal death. I believe it wasn't too long ago, actually, when the last servers were just unplugged. And that game vanished. So that's where it's so complete and total compared to going back and playing a game of 6th edition Warhammer, where if you can find players and you have the rules and you have the models, then you can play that game, that edition, your favorite version of the game, until the very end of time.
You've got those physical, tangible things in your hands. But when it comes to a digital game, you don't have any of that. Not anymore. It used to be that you had a CD.
Yeah, that's right.
Play. But even then, if the game itself is run on a server and there is no way of playing those, as you say, there are potentially the possibilities of
private
servers somewhere, but they're going to be totally out of whack. There's going to be very few people on them. Often they're complex to get into, so it requires so much more effort than just play on your machine. Really, when it comes to tabletop wargaming, all is not lost, is it?
All is not lost. It's almost never lost. I mean, I bet if you search hard enough, or if you feel the need to do so yourself, you can probably find or bring into life a community for any of these so-called dead and deceased games. You can probably go and find people somewhere, some dark corner of the world, playing Confrontation.
Probably it was a very solid game. When it
Yeah.
comes to WildStar and the digital games, I mean, I never played WildStar. I heard you talk about it an awful lot, though, Grumsworth.
Yeah, I
And
really
you've
enjoyed it.
spoken very fondly of it. So it's a shame that I never had a chance to play that game. I could play a game of Five Storm Armada with you tomorrow.
I would love you to do that as well. I've
could
got all
never
the
play-
miniatures, all the rules.
Be perfect. But I could never, sadly, now play a game of WildStar, even if I wanted to.
No.
I might be able to watch some videos on YouTube, but that's
Which would
about
be
it.
sad. Would that they'd just make you sad?
It would, so I won't bother doing that.
We have an interesting digital case that we can speak about here, don't we? A game that we've both played for a decent amount of years now. It's had its head cut from it, hasn't it?
I like to think of it more of a limb.
But I think
quite optimistic, yeah.
I think its head has been rudely
And very abruptly.
very abruptly taken from its body. The interesting thing is the body is still stumbling around, isn't it? Kind of upright as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So
it's pretty solid legs.
Solid legs, that's what you need, right? What is it that we're talking about here, Burlokk?
Heroes of the Storm.
That's right. Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah. It's a MOBA, which is it a multiplayer online battle arena?
That's exactly right. Yeah, you've got it locked in,
shorthand?
Burlokk. Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, so we played Heroes of the Storm in the ranked mode and all of the modes available. It's kind of it really is kind of a classic MOBA. There's a big wealth of characters. There used to be a burgeoning tournament scene with sponsorships, official teams, prize money, endless community support. And this particular game is produced and maintained by Blizzard, who, for better or worse, decided that this game needed to go into what they laughably call maintenance mode.
Yeah, so rightly there was a big competitive scene. Very professionally done, in my opinion. The esports scene these days is huge. There are bars and pubs all around the country now called esports bars that will show a lot of the esports that goes on with lots of different styles of games, Blizzard Activision included, which is the likes of Overwatch, the World of Warcraft arena matches, for example. A lot of these places will show these. So the esports scene is big and it's still growing. But what happened with Heroes of the Storm, all of a sudden, some of the casters, I think, for these esports shows, some of the pundits involved put out some tweets saying, have you heard the news? Blizzard have decided to cancel all the esports support, all the competitive play support for Heroes of the Storm.
Yeah, I think that's how we learnt as a world that it was happening. Some decisions were made at some very high level, no doubt, that this game was no longer financially viable to continue supporting in this fashion. So people were laid off. Esports teams suddenly had no prize money to play for. So sponsors
lost their sponsorship,
left. So this was one of those things that this affected people's livelihoods as well. And what actually, and the community obviously went into rage mode, didn't they? There were an awful lot of people really flipping out over it. And even, I would say, people on the level that we play the game and enjoy it, we were suddenly like, okay, so we were hoping to have a new character released every 2 or 3 months and constant balances and adjustments made to the game to keep it fresh and enjoyable and competitive. This doesn't appear that they're interested in doing this anymore for us. And the game felt at the time very, very strong and healthy, very vibrant. The esports scene for it was really decent, well covered by the media and things like this. So it was an unusual death, wasn't it? And very out of the blue.
It came as such a shock that I think, as some of the points we've raised already, they were all called into question. It was the trust in the company. It was the betrayal that a lot of the teams felt. It was the backlash that the community were then giving to the to Blizzard, Blizzard Activision as they're now known. And it was a matter of saying, well, is this the end of the game? Is this just the end of the esports? What is it you're doing with this game? So there was no confidence all of a sudden, as far as I was concerned. There was no
None
confidence.
at all. Nothing. No.
I stopped playing for a little while afterwards. I'm now playing again. I think it's still a good game to play. But I think there was a long period of time where people were so unsure about what was
Just
even
didn't want to touch it.
They
Yeah.
were like, well, I'm not going to invest any more time into this. And it is a free-to-play game. Don't get me wrong. So it's not as if there was a huge expenditure for people. Yeah, so it was an odd one, and a lot of the casters that did a very, very good job, casting all the esports stuff. A lot of those were just as in the dark as a lot of the your everyday Joes like us were.
Yeah.
So it didn't really make a lot of sense, did it?
It didn't. For the purposes of our conversation here, it is the case that this was a quick and fairly deep-reaching cut to the throat death of the game, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
It appeared like, you take out the very top tier of players, you take out the prize pool and the coverage for it, and you're left with a game which is under the dubious protection of maintenance mode, which kind of, actually, it turns out, because we're a couple of years down the road now, aren't we?
Yeah, actually, yeah. Time has passed fairly swiftly since then.
Time has passed. The game still receives some balancing changes. There's still evidently a small team working to keep the blood pumping round the headless body.
And the game does seem to be, whilst it's in maintenance mode, as you say, it is in maintenance mode. From my experience, it's still getting patches. There's balancing patches released. Yeah, quite regularly actually. So that's the odd thing about this particular game, Death, is that it isn't quite dead. You've still got a game that's being operated and being the servers are still live. So it's in that weird sort of limbo stage, and it appears to be coming out the other. Yeah, perhaps it's in a state of undeath. It appears to be. There could be new tournaments brought out for it soon. There seems to be a little bit of community support going back into it. So there seems to be a little bit of traction being built back into the game again, but purely from a community side. Who knows what the future holds for a game like Heroes of the Storm, but for what it's worth, I do still play it, and I still quite enjoy it for what it is. It's just a shame it doesn't get the proper support that it deserves.
That's right. I think, yeah. And I think you mentioned a really decent point there with the fact that it is, obviously, Blizzard are still looking after it somewhat, a little, a small team of people keeping it ticking over. It does make them some money because there are microtransactions involved, small cosmetic purchases that a player can make. So there must still be some value in having those servers still running and healthy and good, and employing the small team that they do. I think, as you say, the community are driving a lot of the sort of continued life support for this ailing game. Setting up their sort of own homebrew tournaments, gathering prize pools together, paying for casters and old, experienced, well-loved faces, names in the game, still dip in time to time.
Yeah.
So there is still quite a strong community, even to a game which the company who produces and manages it have said, we're not really keeping an eye on this anymore. We're leaving it out there for you to use as you wish and enjoy. And myself, again, like, I still enjoy playing it. But I do fear that one day it might suffer the same fate that beloved WildStar did.
Yeah.
One day those servers, with their glowing little dials and buttons, lamps, lights, little mechanical cogs and stuff like that, they're gently disconnected and left to gather dust.
Repurposed for the great machine.
Repurposed. Welcome to the machine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, take heart though, all you wonderful listeners. Don't be morbid and distressed at this sad tale of game death. for all of you are as old school as we are, I'm sure, and you have vast swathes of miniatures at your disposal, reams and reams of old rule books that you can grab and play with all your eager friends. So yeah, be heartened by that. As tabletop wargamers and tabletop gamers in general, we like the tangible and the real as much as we like the digital.
We do. We like a bit of both, certainly. It's what do they say? I was going to say moderation in all things, but I'm not sure I believe that really.
A bit of excess is good from time to time, isn't it?
It is. It is. The Palace of Wisdom lies there, right, Burlokk?
That's right.
That's
Palace
right.
of Wisdom.
Hello once more, Burlokk. Welcome back, everyone, to the most notable segment of this entire fine endeavour, where the magic happens, where myself and Burlokk there are going to take a listener/viewer suggested card from the collectible card game Magic the Gathering, and we're going to deconstruct it before your very eyes. We're going to take it to pieces. We're going to have a little look at how it works within the game. We're going to investigate the artwork. General ramble. There'll probably be a funny voice doing a little bit of flavour text about it right towards the end. Burlokk, ramble.
Yes. So this is courtesy of Terry T, is it not?
It is. It is courtesy of Terry T, who has selected something wonderful for us, hasn't he?
Yeah, this is a green chap, a green card here. And he costs 4 mana, 3 colourless or 3 generic, and 1 green. He's a creature, a spider. He's an uncommon card from the Born of the Gods set, which was the 3rd release of the Theros range.
Yeah, which was a block that was loosely based on a lot of Greek kind of classical mythology, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, lovely set, lots of enchantment creatures and all sorts. But this chap, a creature. He's a spider. He's quite a lovely looking thing, I think.
I think he's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it might be a lady spider.
It's brought to us by Richard Wright, or painted for Wizards of the Coast, should I say, by Richard Wright.
And Richard there he's done a fine piece of work. I know we say this about almost every card that we get in this section, but that is because I think there's something to be enjoyed about the art in almost all of these cards. You just need to know where to look, right? So obviously we've got a big old spider here. It's given some of its dimension, its scale, by the surrounding trees. Do you think they're Burlokk?
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw this, I didn't quite see that they were actually trees, but I think they are. This is sort of the edge of a forest, isn't it? Almost.
I think so. Yeah. This grave robber spider there is coming back to its lair, its home from the sunny, bright, beautiful outside world, back to its web kind of cloaked little den, isn't it?
Yeah, he looks quite comfortable down in this dark area, this dark pit, or this dark passageway with his web, marking that area. I quite like how the light, bright blue sky is very small in comparison to the rest of the portrait, to the rest of the composition.
I think that helps exaggerate or give scale. The background of this picture, this blue sky and this very hazy looking sort of summer's day, it's almost being blotted out, as far as our point of view is concerned, by the size of this spider. Yeah. So this is not an insignificant arachnid, and that is also reflected in the stats as well. So we can gauge this creature's size. I think this is an interesting one, kind of colour-wise, the composition of the picture, I mean, because we've got like we've got some good contrast between the very dark green, grey, slightly desaturated areas of its sort of surrounds. The spider itself still quite kind of hazy around its kind of rear portions and its legs.
Yeah.
The only thing in real sharp focus are these sort of little claw-like appendages on the end of its front legs there, and also some of the undergrowth right close to us, which is catching an errant beam of sunlight, isn't it?
Yeah, I quite like how he is, despite the fact that his legs are coming over the area of light, for instance, or safety, perhaps.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that he's sort of enveloped that with all his little legs, that's quite an imposing pose, like quite a frightening pose for the spider to be in. But I do feel
Yeah.
there's not a great deal of threat from the palette, from the picture itself, because it seems quite bright. It's not particularly frightening.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I think that's reinforced a little bit by the fact that we've got no gory detail here, despite
Yeah.
the fact that this is a grave robber spider. It's not hauling around corpses in its little webs or in its claws or anything like this. We've got nothing suggestive of that. The spider itself also kind of looks slightly cuddly. Do you think? It's kind of,
Yeah.
it looks like it's cloaked in soft brown fur. You know, I mean, obviously this thing would actually be a nightmare should you ever encounter one of these in the wild on your travels and such. But in this picture, I agree, it does not look massively menacing.
I think that's quite reflective in its mechanics, which we'll go into in a little bit. But with regards to sort of the general contrast, to back that up as well, I think how the darkness is only on sort of the right hand portion of the picture where this tunnel or pathway through the forest will lead. But the focus really is on the blue sky section of that
Outside of it,
contrast.
behind the spider, yeah, I think so also. And the spider actually itself, it occupies the kind of warmer piece of the picture, doesn't it, palette wise, in this kind of like this fuzzy, warm brown. We've not got some sort of terrifying looking bemandibled face. The artist, I think, has put us in mind of something which is just a naturally to be found piece of wildlife in this forest, as you might come across a deer, or maybe more threatening wildlife like a bear or something like this. But in a sort of fantastical setting such as this, there are many more horrific and obviously threatening looking things that you could find kicking about in a forest, aren't there?
Yeah, I think the pincers in the foreground here are quite interesting. I don't quite get them. I think they make a bit of sense when you think of them as a grave robber spider. Perhaps these spiky appendages will be used to sort of till the soil away to exhume or
Yeah,
to
that's a
exhume
good
whatever
point.
corpses he's got
Yeah.
under there, or whatever dead creatures he's found, or perhaps whatever dead creatures have wandered into his own web.
Yes,
He's just
that's
there to sort
true.
of fish them out and use them for his own use. But
The pincers themselves look unusual,
yeah,
I think. I mean, they're not completely out of place,
no,
but you would expect to find them maybe more on a scorpion or other kind of arachnidy looking thing. It's fine
yeah,
that this creature's got pincers. I think they do add a point of interest to the spider, because otherwise what we got there is a big brown spid, haven't we,
yeah,
really?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that's what we're looking at.
yeah.
So I quite like the artist's decision to add something slightly different, because in the world of Magic: The Gathering, a gigantic spider is not an uncommon thing, is it?
Well, this particular card is uncommon, but no, a giant spider isn't. I mean, I think giant spider actually has been a
Yeah,
card in Magic since the very
since
beginning,
Alpha. Yeah.
since Alpha. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I believe actually at one stage they released a little poll to Magic players via their website, I think, and
Okay.
they were torn between the giant spider or another card for which they should print, and they said, well, we can't decide which one we want to keep for this set. So is it going to be this one or is it going to be this one? Both of these cards have
Yeah.
been around for a long, long, long time, and I think that the community chose the spider to stay. So the giant spider has
Wrong
been,
choice.
from start to finish, the giant spider's been in Magic. So yeah, it's certainly not an unusual sight to see a giant spider like this in Magic: The Gathering. But that
So
being said, he's slightly different to your standard giant spider, isn't he?
he is, and consequently, I think fair enough for whacking a couple of little claws on his front legs. You know?
Yeah, yeah. But also with regard to its mechanics, what do you think about
Yes.
those?
So it has, mechanically, it is a very traditional, in the Magic: The Gathering sense, spider. isn't it? So we've got the ability reach on it. Actually, let's talk about its power and its toughness first. The 2/4 split there is almost like every other giant spider, isn't it? They tend to be kind of low on their power, the damage that they deal, and at the higher end of low with their health points, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit more defensive in that sense.
A little bit more defensive, yeah. Perhaps representing the fact that these creatures are not overly aggressive, and are good at hiding, good at sheltering, despite their bulk and size, among their chosen habitat. So this is quite a standard stat line, but it's useful mechanically as well, because it helps out having a little bit of health on your side, some toughness about you, if you have the ability reach. So reach allows this creature to block creatures that have flying, even though it does not itself. Back in the older sets, that would have been described to you on the card. It would have said giant spider is able to block creatures as if it had flying. Yeah. So, but they basically crunch that down to the keyword there, reach. Yeah, which makes lovely sense, doesn't it? You know, you can imagine creatures of a arachnid variety being able to, in the same way that they can catch flies in our own world, you know, they can throw their webs large and wide, haggle these creatures down out of the air, spin them up, eat them up as a nourishing meal. That's what reach does.
That's why I think the artist's attempt at making this guy look perhaps not as aggressive as some other creatures in the Theros block have looked, as far as their art goes, it works quite nicely with this card, because it's almost as if he's just in the background. The spider itself is in the background, you know. So it's he's dangerous if you get too close. Because you'll be able to, you know, he's a defensive card, so he's almost, if you've got this spider on the board, it's going to be, well, I don't want to attack into that.
Maybe so. Yeah. Very sad that you should never steer away from a spider. I mean, one that big, probably.
That's my point. Sorry, this big, certainly.
So we've got the reach on there. That's lovely. That's traditional spider work there. Right. We also have this little mechanic here, which blends in with its tiny little pincers and its name primarily there. So what we've got is an ability here, which you can pay mana to activate, 3 colorless, and a single black, which, as astute followers of this game have noticed, this is a green card, but the activation of this ability requires a little bit of black mana. So what we have here is something that, color-wise, the black and green there, fits into the Golgari bit, doesn't it?
The Golgari color split,
The color split, that's right. Yeah. So the black and green, which are associated with the kind of the natural cycle of birth and death, isn't it? Which works well, being as this is a grave robber spider. What this does for us, if we pay this cost, this 3 colorless and this 1 black, the grave robber spider gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Activate this ability only once each turn. So what this basically does for us is, if your graveyard is absolutely littered, loaded with cards, this grave robber spider is going to be, well, it could be absolutely gigantic, couldn't it? It could be monstrous.
Yeah.
If you've got 1 or 2 cards in your graveyard there, this thing is becoming much more defensive, and it's getting a little bite power damage wise as well. Combined with the fact that it has reach, can block creatures with flying, this actually, you know, when you activate this ability, even early game as well, you're getting quite an astute blocker.
Yeah, and if you're going up against a player fielding this sort of card, you've got to be aware of what's actually in your opponent's graveyard that much more, because if it catches you out by surprise, there's 5, you didn't realize there were 5 or 6 creature cards in the graveyard there. this thing can be a lot
Yeah.
bigger than you perhaps thought. So you really got to think
Yeah.
twice about fighting into something like this. Yeah, and it works really well in synergy with loads of other Golgari cards that allow you to stock your graveyard, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It does. It synergizes very well. Actually, it's certainly been, although thematically it works well as well. This ability with the title of this card,
Yeah.
I think it has been engineered. It's been created to fit well, hasn't it, with those sort of decks,
I
which
think so.
use the graveyard as the kind of the core battery for your various effects.
Certain dredge decks, for example, or
Dredge decks, yeah.
other sort of archetypes that use a lot of the graveyard synergies. Yeah, it becomes a bit of a dumping ground for it becomes their engine for their deck a lot of the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
cool card, and you can sort of see where these pincer-like claws come from here, where he's rummaging through the earth to find all the corpses. You
He
can sort of
shuffles.
see,
Yeah, he shuffles around with your dead. That's what he does.
munches them up, gets a bit stronger for a turn.
He does for a bit. Yeah, yeah. And so we've got a nice little bit of flavor text as well, haven't we, on this as well?
Yeah.
Did you want to have a go at reading that in a professional fashion?
Oh, of course, yeah. So it goes on to say here, cloaks woven from its webs are durable and waterproof, but said to bring on nightmares.
I knew it. I should have abandoned that cloak years ago. That will be the reason. That'll be the reason I haven't had sleep for the last 20 odd years, you know?
Oh, exactly. That's not goose down. That's
It's not.
spider web.
It's grave robber's spider web. Damn it. I'm keeping it. But that's quite nice as well, isn't it? Because that, again, this is kind of suggesting a little bit, along with its ability, its grave robbing ability, we'll call it there, that this creature, there is something innately sinister about it. Even though when you first play it, you're playing it for a standard cost for a spider, but if you whack a little bit of black, a little bit of nasty, a little bit of swampy black color pie edge about it, and his web is going to give you nightmares.
One thing I like about the flavor text, actually, it kind of hints that these creatures are quite replete throughout the land of Theros. That they're used for things like they're
cloaks.
They're used to weave cloaks. So as if I'm going to go to the nearest grave robber spider nest and gather up some web to make me a new cloak, which is interesting, isn't it? It gives you a little bit of flavor for the world, perhaps.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yeah. So once again, we have a card that kind of, the art synergizes really well with the mechanics. It's been really well thought out, and it gives us a little bit of another little piece of the world of Theros is filled in by looking at this card, looking at the artwork there, reading through the flavor text. And again, we're all a little bit wiser to the habits of certain forest-dwelling giant spiders on the plane of Theros.
And those who wear the cloaks.
And those who wear the cloaks. Shameful as we are. Never knew it. I'll try. I'll have a little rest this evening without draping that round my shoulders. See if it works at all.
I think you'll be much better off. Yeah. Good job, Richard Wright, though. Nice job on the artwork.
Excellent work. Yeah, thanks, Terry. You've given us a fine boon there.
Indeed, yeah. And talking of cloaks and drapery drapery falling, perhaps. I do believe it's getting close to that time, isn't it, brother?
I think it is. Yeah, yeah. I think the cloaks are going to fall upon our very heads. They're probably being thrown out in a wild and ungainly manner by our old. I was going to say he's our comrade in arms. He's not, though, is he?
No.
Father Time is yet again. He's pressing down upon us, isn't he? He's ringing in the curtain call of this podcast, made as it is, woven from the webs of the grave robber spider. In short, guys and girls, we're going to finish up here, aren't we, Burlokk?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's been good fun.
It has been. It's been a treat as always, and I hope anyone who's viewing this or listening to it has enjoyed it, gleaned a bit of useful knowledge. If nothing else, it has sufficiently filled a little chunk of your life with something vaguely interesting.
I hope so.
I think that's a pretty achievable goal for us, Burlokk.
Yeah, make something interesting enough to fill a little piece of time.
Do you think we should continue to do this?
I think we should. I think we certainly should, yes. And I honestly hope that plenty more people come along for the ride as well.
I hope so. It would be a joy to have you all on board. So, with that in mind, if you could do us the honours of liking and subscribing to this channel. If you thought this video was a good one, hit the bell, get the old thumbs up going, because that would help us greatly.
It would. It'd be a huge boon for us. Yeah, it'd really help to buoy our spirits, if anything else.
That's just what I was going to say. It'd really lift our spirits, right? So if you could do that, that would be wonderful. You can find us also on Spotify. Can you presently find us on Player FM?
Player FM, yep, Spotify, Player FM. I believe we're on Apple Podcasts now as well. So we should be on all the major podcast platforms and outlets for your ears to enjoy. But certainly, if you would be so kind as to send a little message, as Grumsworth said, please do.
Please do. That'd be lovely. Yeah, we'd like to hear from more of you, even if you just randomly spit out the name of a magic card you'd like us to dissect. Or if it's the case that you have been a party to or witnessed the death of a game, as per our main segment, that'd be really interesting to hear about too, because I'm sure that there are lots of games, great and small, that have vanished under the wheels, the tread of time, that we're completely unaware of. Yeah.
I'll be over the moon to hear about anybody's experiences or anybody's
with the death of a game.
With the death of a game, yeah, it'd make me feel real good. Yeah, but honestly, no, let us know if you have anything interesting. And who knows, maybe we'll bring it up on one of our future episodes.
We might do, or you might be treated to us throwing out a few comments. So
please be part of it, and keep your eyes peeled on the YouTube channel, because we're going to be bringing you a few little extra videos as well, aren't we?
We are, yeah. We're going to be, I don't think we can go. It's a little bit of a secret work at the moment, but you might hear something interesting from us. Yeah. Maybe around about the middle of the week. Maybe we're coming up to the 10th episode, aren't we? Of this.
Mm.
And we're the sort of people who will mark any sort of occasion that we possibly can. So 10 might be something slightly different for it, might there? We'll be raising more than a toast for episode 10. So please join us for that. I'm going to bid you all a fond farewell. Hope you've enjoyed this. And I think now it's time for Master Burlokk to take us all home with a fine quote that he has selected for us, and he's going to perform for us.
Perform, indeed. Well, I should bid you all farewell. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Grumsworth, and thank you for joining us, everybody. And I shall leave you with this short passage. Only the insane have strength enough to prosper. Only those who prosper may truly judge what is sane. You've been listening to The Preamble. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. And if you want to contact us, just send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com or find us at The Preamble on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com. Special thanks to our contributors, our spotlight artist, and of course, to all of you. See you next time.